The wind howled through the ancient forest like a forgotten prayer, carrying with it the scent of rain and wild jasmine. Under the full moon's silver gaze, a woman rode alone through the darkness, her white hair streaming behind her like threads of starlight. She wore crimson, the color of blood and royalty, though no crown adorned her head tonight. For 4 years, Alpha Queen Brissa Suncrest had ruled this kingdom with iron will and aching solitude. Tonight, she sought something she could not name. Freedom, perhaps, or simply the illusion of being human again. The white stallion beneath her moved with liquid grace, hooves striking the earth in rhythmic thunder. She had left the castle without guards, without ceremony, wearing only her finest dress and the weight of countless sleepless nights. The council would be furious. Let them be. She needed air. She needed the wild. She needed to remember what it felt like to be Brissa, not just the queen who had buried her king and refused to remarry, who had held a fractured realm together with bloodied hands and borrowed courage. The moon watched. The wind whispered. And then, without warning, a shadow darted across the path. A fox, perhaps, or a trick of light. The stallion reared, wild-eyed and terrified. Brissa, caught off guard, felt the world tilt. Her fingers grasped for the reins, but the leather slipped through her hands like water. She fell, the ground rushing up to meet her with brutal finality. Her crown, small and silver and hidden beneath her cloak, tangled in the stallion's mane as the horse bolted into the night, taking with it the only proof of who she truly was. Pain bloomed across her temple. Darkness swallowed the moon. Silence. Hours passed like centuries. The forest held its breath. And then, footsteps. Corvac Stormrift walked the old road as he did every night, checking his traps before dawn broke the eastern sky. He was a man carved from mountain stone and winter storms, tall and broad-shouldered, with long black hair that fell past his shoulders and a beard that framed a face both fierce and contemplative. His hands were calloused from labor, his back strong from years of carrying burdens no nobleman would understand. He owned nothing but his small wooden house, a patch of land, and a reputation for being harder than the iron he sometimes worked. The village feared him a little, respected him more. He spoke rarely, smiled never, and had buried his own family years ago in a plague that took everything soft from his eyes. But tonight, those eyes found something that made him stop mid-stride. A woman lay crumpled on the road, her crimson dress torn and muddied, white hair spilled across the dirt like spilled milk. Blood traced a delicate line down her temple. She was not moving. For a long moment, Corvac simply stared. Then, without hesitation, he knelt beside her, pressing 2 rough fingers to her throat. A pulse, faint but steady, fluttered beneath his touch like a trapped bird. Relief flooded through him, surprising in its intensity. He looked around. No carriage, no guards. No sign of who she was or where she had come from. Only the fine quality of her dress that spoke of wealth he could never imagine. A lady, perhaps. Lost, thrown from her horse. Alone. The word echoed in his mind with strange familiarity. Corvac slid his arms beneath her, lifting her with effortless strength. She weighed nothing. This woman who smelled of lavender and something wilder, something that reminded him of storms before they broke. He cradled her against his chest and began the long walk home, his massive frame moving with surprising gentleness through the darkness. His house was small and simple. 1 room with a hearth, a table, a bed of straw and wool. He laid her down carefully, then set about building a fire. The flames cast dancing shadows across her pale face, revealing features that seemed sculpted by some artist who understood beauty as something both fragile and eternal. High cheekbones, full lips, a nose slightly crooked, as if broken once and healed imperfectly. She was, he realized with uncomfortable awareness, the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. He pushed the thought away and focused on what mattered. Survival. Before we continue with the story, I want to thank everyone who supports the channel and loves our Alpha King romances. In the pinned comment, you'll find a special selection of the best Amazon audiobooks that inspire our stories. If you purchase any audiobook through those links, you'll be directly supporting the channel and helping us create more stories. Tell us where you're watching from and how old you are in the comments. I hope you enjoy the story. Korvek cleaned the wound on her temple with water boiled over the fire, his large hands moving with surprising delicacy. He wrapped her head in clean linen torn from his only spare shirt. He checked for other injuries, finding bruises along her ribs and a twisted ankle, which he bound with practiced efficiency. Years of living alone had taught him these skills. You learned to heal yourself, or you died. When he finished, he sat back on his heels and studied her face. Who was she? Why had she been alone on that road? Questions he would ask when she woke. If she woke. He fed the fire through the night, watching her breathe. Once, she murmured something in her sleep, a name he could not catch. He leaned forward, drawn by some instinct he did not understand, and smoothed the white hair back from her forehead. Sleep, he thought, but did not say. You are safe here. Dawn came slowly, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. She did not wake. Korvek made broth from dried meat and herbs, letting it simmer while he tended his land. But every hour he returned to check on her, drawn by something he could not name. Responsibility, perhaps, or something deeper, more dangerous. The second night fell. Still she slept, though her breathing grew stronger, her color better. He sat beside her in the firelight, watching the way the flames painted her face in amber and shadow. He found himself wondering about her life. Had she been loved? Did someone search for her even now? Was there a man somewhere who called her his own? The thought brought an unexpected tightness to his chest. He turned away, angry at himself. She was not for him. She was some nobleman's daughter, some merchant's wife. When she woke, she would thank him with words that tasted of obligation and leave without looking back. That was how the world worked. People like her did not notice people like him, except as servants or obstacles. But even as he thought it, he knew he would remember her face for the rest of his life. On the third morning, as pale light filtered through the cracks in the wooden walls, she opened her eyes. For a long moment she simply stared at the unfamiliar ceiling, disoriented. Then her gaze found him, and she froze. Korvek sat at the table, carving a piece of wood with steady hands. He looked up when he felt her attention, and their eyes met across the small room. Hers were the color of winter ice, shot through with silver, impossibly bright against her pale skin. His were dark as midnight, guarded, revealing nothing. Neither spoke. Then slowly, she tried to sit up. Pain flickered across her face, and instantly Korvek was there, moving with surprising speed for a man so large. He caught her shoulder with one hand, steadying her. Do not move too quickly, he said, his voice low and rough from disuse. You hit your head. You have been asleep for 2 days. She looked up at him, and he saw the questions forming in those extraordinary eyes. But what she said surprised him. Who are you? He released her shoulder and stepped back, giving her space. Korvek storm-riffed. I found you on the road. You were hurt. She touched the bandage on her head, wincing. I fell. My horse. Gone, he said simply. There was no one else, just you. She absorbed this in silence, her gaze moving around the humble room, taking in the poverty that surrounded her. The single room, the rough-hewn furniture, the complete absence of luxury. When her eyes returned to his, he expected disgust, or at least discomfort. Instead, she said softly, "Thank you. For helping me." Something in his chest loosened. He gave a curt nod. "You should eat. You need strength." He brought her the broth he had made, and she accepted it with hands that trembled slightly. She drank slowly, and he saw the moment the warmth spread through her, saw her shoulders relax just a fraction. "What is your name?" he asked, returning to his seat at the table, maintaining distance. She hesitated. For just a heartbeat he saw something like fear cross her face. Then she said simply, "Brisa. No family name, no title, just Brisa." He did not press. Everyone had secrets. He had his own. "Where were you going, Brisa?" he asked instead. She looked down at the bowl in her hands. Away. Just away. He understood that. Sometimes away was the only destination that mattered. The days that followed took on a strange, dreamlike quality. Brisa's ankle healed slowly, and she could not walk far without pain. She insisted she did not want to be a burden, but Korvek dismissed her protests with characteristic bluntness. "You cannot leave yet. You would not make it a mile." So she stayed, and the small house that had known only silence for years began to fill with something else. Conversation, at first tentative, then gradually warmer. She asked him about his life, and he answered with economical words, but answers nonetheless. He asked her nothing, respecting her obvious desire for privacy, and she seemed grateful for it. But she volunteered pieces of herself anyway, small fragments that he collected like precious stones. She told him she had been married once, that her husband had died in combat, that she had been alone for 4 years. He told her he had lost his family to plague, that he had lived alone ever since, that he preferred it that way. "Liar," she said, but gently, with a small smile that transformed her face. He almost smiled back. Almost. She began helping with small tasks, despite his protests. She could not chop wood or haul water, but she could mend his torn clothing with neat stitches, could prepare vegetables for their simple meals, could organize his chaotic shelves with deft efficiency. He watched her move through his space, making it somehow more like a home, and felt the dangerous stirring of something he had thought long dead. Hope, perhaps, or hunger for something more than mere survival. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked. She asked him about strategy, about how he would defend the village if bandits came. It was an odd question, but he answered thoughtfully, sketching plans in the dirt floor with a stick. She listened with intense focus, asking penetrating questions that revealed a mind far sharper than he had expected. "You think like a general," he observed one night, watching her study his crude maps. She looked up, startled. "And you think like one too. Yet you are a farmer. I am a survivor," he corrected. "I pay attention. I learn." She held his gaze for a long moment, and something passed between them, some recognition of kindred spirits. Then she smiled, and it reached her eyes for the first time since she had woken. "We are the same," she said softly. "No," he thought, but did not say. "You are everything. I am nothing." But the distance between them was shrinking with each passing day, and they both felt it. One night, a storm came. Rain hammered the roof like fists, and wind howled through the cracks in the walls. The fire danced wildly, casting erratic shadows. Brisa stood at the small window, watching the lightning split the sky, and Korvek saw her shoulders shake. He crossed the room before he could think better of it. "Are you cold?" She shook her head, but did not turn around. "I am afraid," she whispered. "Of the storm? Of what comes after?" He did not understand, but he placed one large hand on her shoulder, offering comfort the only way he knew how. Solid presence. Silent support. She turned then, looking up at him, and the firelight caught in her silver eyes like trapped stars. "You are a good man," Korvek storm riffed. "I am just a man," he said roughly. She reached up, her small hand covering his where it rested on her shoulder. "No, you are more." The air between them thickened, charged with something neither dared name. He should step back. He should remember his place. She was a lady, and he was nothing, and this could only end in pain. But when she swayed toward him, just slightly, he found he could not move away. "Brissa," he said, a warning or a plea, he did not know which. She closed the final distance, rising on her toes, and pressed her lips to his. The world stopped. For a heartbeat, he stood frozen, shock and desire warring within him. Then, with a low sound that might have been surrender or defiance, he wrapped his arms around her and kissed her back with years of loneliness and longing pouring through him like a flood breaking through a dam. She tasted of rain and smoke, and something indefinably her. Her hands fisted in his long black hair, pulling him closer, and he lifted her as if she weighed nothing, crushing her against his chest. The kiss deepened, turning desperate. 4 years of solitude meeting 4 years of isolation in a collision that felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers, his large hands cradling her face with heartbreaking gentleness. "This is madness," he said hoarsely. "I know," she whispered. "You will leave. You will return to your life wherever it is. And I will be here, alone again." "I know," she said again, and a single tear traced down her pale cheek. He caught it with his thumb, then kissed her again, softer this time, tasting salt and sorrow and something that felt dangerously like love. They stood together in the firelight while the storm raged outside, 2 souls who had found each other in the darkness and were desperately afraid of the dawn. The days that followed were filled with stolen moments and growing intimacy. They did not speak of the future, as if naming it would shatter the fragile present. Instead, they existed in a bubble of borrowed time, learning each other with touch and word and comfortable silence. Korvek showed her his land, helped her walk through the forest when her ankle grew strong enough. He taught her the names of plants, how to track animals, how to read the weather in the clouds. She absorbed everything with hungry intelligence, asking questions that revealed depths he had not expected. She told him stories of the capital, carefully edited to remove any hint of her true position. She spoke of politics and intrigue, of a court filled with vipers and sycophants, of a world where trust was currency and betrayal was commonplace. He listened, understanding more than she said, seeing the exhaustion beneath her words. "You are running from something," he said one afternoon as they sat beside a stream, their feet dangling in the cold water. She was quiet for a long time. Then finally, "Yes." "Do you want to tell me what?" She looked at him with those extraordinary eyes, and he saw the war being waged behind them, the desire to trust warring with years of learned caution. In the end, caution won. "Not yet," she said. "Perhaps not ever. Would that be enough?" He took her hand, his calloused fingers threading through her smaller, softer ones. Yes, because the truth was, he had fallen in love with her. Completely. Irrevocably. And he knew with bone-deep certainty that when she left, she would take a piece of his soul with her that he would never recover. But he would give it freely. She was worth the cost. She seemed to sense his thoughts, because she leaned against him, resting her white head on his broad shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, holding her close, and they sat in silence, as the water sang over the stones, and the sun filtered through the leaves like liquid gold. "I wish this could last forever," she whispered. "So do I," he said, and meant it more than he had ever meant anything. But forever was a luxury neither of them could afford. The summons came on a gray morning 3 weeks after he had found her. Riders appeared on the road, a dozen men in armor bearing the royal crest. Korvek saw them from his field and felt his blood turn to ice. He dropped his tools and ran toward the house, fear driving him faster than he had ever moved. He burst through the door to find Brissa standing frozen at the window, her face white as death. Who are they? He demanded. She turned to him, and he saw the truth in her eyes before she spoke. My guards. They have found me. Ladies' guards, then. He had known she was highborn. But the relief he should feel at her safety was drowned by the anguish of impending loss. You must go to them, he said, forcing the words past the tightness in his throat. Korvek, she started, but he shook his head. You have a life, a real life. I always knew you would return to it. She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and grabbed his face with both hands, forcing him to look at her. Listen to me. What we have shared these weeks has been more real than anything I have known in years. But it cannot continue, he said flatly. You belong in palaces. I belong here. That is the way of the world. Damn the world, she said fiercely. A knock thundered on the door. Your Grace, a voice called. We know you are inside. We must return you to the capital immediately. Your Grace. The words fell into the space between them like stones into water, sending ripples of realization through everything they had built. Korvek stepped back, his face carefully blank. You are nobility, more than a lady. She did not deny it. Her hands fell to her sides, and she looked at him with eyes full of anguish and something else. Something that looked like shame. Who are you? He asked, though part of him already knew. The intelligence, the strategic thinking, the way she carried herself, even in his humble home. The guards addressing her as Your Grace. The door opened, the guards entered, and every one of them dropped immediately to one knee. Alpha Queen Brisa Suncrest, their captain announced. We have searched for weeks. The kingdom rejoices at your recovery. The world tilted. Queen, not a lady, not a merchant's daughter. The queen, the woman who ruled the entire kingdom, the widow who had held a fractured realm together for 4 years through sheer will and iron strength. She had been in his house, sleeping in his bed, eating his simple food, kissing him by the firelight. A queen. And he was nothing. Less than nothing. A peasant so far beneath her that their worlds should never have touched. Korvek felt something inside him break. He turned away, unable to look at her. You should go, he said, his voice empty. Korvek, please, she said, and he heard the tears in her voice. But he could not turn around. If he turned around, he would beg her to stay. And that would be the cruelest thing he could do. To both of them. The guards surrounded her, shepherding her toward the door. She resisted, calling his name. But he stood with his back to her, hands clenched into fists, every muscle locked against the urge to go to her. I will come back, she called out desperately. I swear it. He said nothing. What could he say? That he loved her? That she had given him 3 weeks of happiness in a life filled with gray? That losing her would be worse than the plague that took his family? Because at least then he had not known what he was losing. The door closed. Hoofbeats faded. Silence returned. Korvek stood alone in his small house and felt the walls close in around him like a tomb. The weeks that followed were the longest of his life. He worked from dawn until dark, pushing his body to exhaustion, trying to outrun the ache that had taken up residence in his chest. The village noticed his increased grimness, but said nothing. Korvek had always been a man of few words and hard edges. If he had grown harder, sharper, who could blame him? But at night, alone in the darkness, he could not escape her memory. The way she laughed, the feel of her hand in his, the taste of her kiss, the silver of her eyes in firelight. A queen. He had saved a queen and fallen in love with her, and the cruelty of it was that she had loved him back. He knew she had. He had seen it in every look, felt it in every touch. She had not been pretending. But love was not enough. It had never been enough. The world did not care about the feelings between a peasant and a queen. Duty, obligation, propriety. These things mattered. Personal happiness was a luxury neither of them could afford. He told himself he had done the right thing by letting her go without a fight. She belonged on a throne, not in a hovel. She deserved someone educated, refined, worthy of her position. But late at night, in the darkness, another voice whispered that he had been a coward, that he had given up without trying because he was afraid. Afraid that she would realize eventually that he was not enough. Better to lose her now than wait for the inevitable rejection later. A month passed, then 2. The village began preparing for harvest, and Korvek threw himself into the work with singular focus. He was in the field when the rider came, a young man in royal livery who dismounted with the kind of swagger that came from never having worked a day in his life. "You are Korvek Stormrift?" the rider asked, looking around the modest farm with barely concealed disdain. "Yes." The rider handed him a sealed letter. "From the capital. Her Majesty requests your presence." Korvek took the letter but did not open it. "Tell Her Majesty I am needed here. The harvest does not wait." The rider's eyes widened. "You would refuse a royal summons?" "I would refuse to leave my responsibilities. I am a farmer. I cannot drop everything because..." "Because what?" the Queen asks. The rider shook his head in disbelief. "She has asked for you specifically, multiple times. She will not take no for an answer." "Then she will have to learn disappointment," Korvek said flatly, and turned his back on the rider, returning to his work. But his hands shook as he gripped the plow. The letter remained unopened on his table for 3 days. He looked at it every morning and every night, the royal seal gleaming in the firelight like an accusation. Finally, on the 4th day, he broke the wax and unfolded the parchment. Her handwriting was elegant and precise, every letter perfectly formed. But the words themselves were raw, unguarded, stripped of royal formality. "Korvek, I have tried to respect your choice. I have tried to let you go. But I find I cannot, not without speaking the truth one more time. You believe you are unworthy. You believe the distance between us is too great. You are wrong. These weeks without you have been worse than the 4 years I spent ruling alone. At least then I did not know what I was missing. Now I know, and the knowledge is a wound that will not heal. I am not asking you to love a queen. I am asking you to love me. Brissa, the woman who found peace in your house, who laughed for the first time in years over your terrible jokes, who felt safe in your arms when the storm raged. Come to the capital, not as a subject, but as an equal. Let me show you that the distance between us is not as great as you think. If you still choose to walk away after that, I will accept it. But please, give me a chance to prove that what we shared was real, that it can be real still. Yours, B. He read the letter 3 times, his chest tightening with each word. She was offering him everything he wanted and feared in equal measure. A chance, hope, a future that seemed impossible. But what if he failed? What if he went to the capital and discovered he truly was not enough? What if the court destroyed whatever they had built in the quiet of his small house? What if, a small voice whispered, he was throwing away his one chance at happiness because he was too afraid to try? He looked around his empty house, at the cold hearth and the empty bed and the silence that pressed in from all sides. Was this really all he wanted from life? Solitude and safety and slow decay? Or was he brave enough to reach for something more, even if it meant risking everything? The decision, when it came, was surprisingly simple. He saddled the horse he had bought with his harvest savings, packed a small bag, and began the 3-day journey to the capital. The city sprawled across the horizon like a living thing, all stone and smoke and noise. Korvek had never seen anything like it. People pressed in from all sides, vendors hawking wares, children running through the streets, carriages rattling over cobblestones. The castle rose at the city's heart, massive and imposing, with towers that seemed to pierce the sky itself. He felt absurdly out of place in his simple clothes and travel-worn boots. Everyone else seemed to know where they were going, moving with purpose and confidence. He was just a peasant farmer who had no business being here, but he had made a promise to himself. He would see this through. The guards at the castle gate stopped him immediately. "State your business." "I was summoned by Her Majesty," he said, feeling ridiculous even as the words left his mouth. The guards exchanged skeptical glances. "Sure you were. Move along. My name is Korvek Stormrift. She sent me a letter." He produced the parchment, now worn from repeated readings. One guard took it, scanned the contents, and his expression shifted from disbelief to shock. "Wait here." Minutes crawled by. Then the guard returned with an older man in fine robes who studied Korvek with sharp, assessing eyes. "You are the one who sheltered Her Majesty after her accident," the man said. It was not a question. "Yes." The man's expression was unreadable. "Follow me." They led him through corridors that made him feel even smaller, past tapestries worth more than his entire farm, beneath ceilings painted with scenes of ancient battles and mythic beasts. Courtiers in silk and jewels stared at him as he passed, whispering behind their hands. He kept his spine straight and his face expressionless, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing his discomfort. Finally, they stopped before massive oak doors carved with intricate designs. The robed man knocked once, then pushed them open. The throne room was cavernous, with windows that let in shafts of golden afternoon light. But Korvek barely noticed the grandeur. His entire attention focused on the woman standing at the far end of the room, silhouetted against the light. Brissa. She turned at the sound of the door, and even across the distance, he saw her sharp intake of breath. She wore a gown of deep blue embroidered with silver, and a crown rested on her white hair, delicate and beautiful. She looked every inch the queen she was, and yet, when their eyes met, he saw the same woman who had sat beside him by the stream, dangling her feet in the water and smiling at the sky. "Leave us," she said, her voice carrying the weight of command. "Your Majesty," the robed man protested. "It is not proper. I said leave us." The authority in her tone brooked no argument. The man bowed stiffly and withdrew, closing the doors behind him with a final, disapproving thud. Silence stretched between them. Korvek stood just inside the doorway, suddenly uncertain. What was he supposed to do? Bow? Kneel? He had no idea how to behave in a throne room. Brissa solved the problem by crossing the space between them with quick, decisive steps. She stopped an arm's length away, looking up at him with those silver eyes that had haunted his dreams. "You came," she said softly. "You asked me to. I did not think you would." He wanted to touch her, to pull her into his arms and feel her solid and real against him. But there was a crown on her head and a throne behind her, and the distance between them suddenly felt vast again. As if reading his thoughts, she reached up and removed the crown, setting it aside on a nearby table with no ceremony whatsoever. Then she closed the final distance and placed her hand over his heart. "There," she said. "No crown, no throne, just us. Like it was in your house." The touch broke something in him. He covered her hand with his own, feeling the warmth of her palm through his shirt. "Brissa, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be what you need." "What I need," she said fiercely, "is you. The man who cared for me when I was hurt, who talked with me by the fire, who made me feel like Brissa instead of a title and a burden. I am a farmer," he said desperately. "I cannot advise you on matters of state. I cannot move in your world. I will embarrass you." She cupped his face with both hands, forcing him to meet her gaze. Do you remember the night I asked you about strategy? About how you would defend the village? Yes. You drew battle plans in the dirt with a stick, and they were brilliant, practical, and unconventional, and exactly what I needed to hear. Do you know why? He shook his head, not trusting his voice. Because my generals think in terms of honor and tradition. They fight the way they were taught, following rules that no longer apply. But you think in terms of survival. You see the terrain, the resources, the reality of what is actually there. That is what I need, Korvek. Someone who sees clearly when everyone else is blinded by protocol. You don't need a farmer for that, he argued. You need an advisor, a strategist. I need you, she said again. And not just for your mind, though I value that more than you know. I need you because you make me feel alive. Because when I am with you, I can breathe. Because I have been alone for so long, and you understand that loneliness better than anyone else ever could. His resolve was crumbling. What if I fail you? She smiled, sad and knowing. What if we fail together? At least then we will not be alone. It was the together that undid him. He pulled her against him, burying his face in her white hair, breathing in the scent of lavender and something uniquely her. She wrapped her arms around his waist, holding him with surprising strength for someone so much smaller. I am terrified, he admitted into her hair. So am I, she whispered back. But I would rather be terrified with you than safe without you. They stood together in the empty throne room, two people who had found each other in the darkness and were choosing, against all odds and logic, to hold on. The council, when Brissa finally introduced him, was predictably hostile. They sat around a massive table in a war room, hung with maps and battle standards, these lords and ladies who had guided the kingdom for decades. Their faces were carved from stone and suspicion. This is Korvek Stormrift, Brissa announced with calm authority. I have asked him to serve as my personal advisor. A lord with iron-gray hair and a face like a granite cliff spoke first. Your Majesty, with all respect, who is this man? He has no title, no education, no military experience that we can find. He has practical wisdom, she countered smoothly, and a perspective we desperately need. A lady in green silk leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Forgive me, Your Majesty, but the court speaks of nothing else. This is the man you disappeared with for 3 weeks. She paused delicately. Farmer who sheltered you. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Korvek felt his jaw tighten. But before he could respond, Brissa's voice cut through the tension like a blade. This is the man who saved my life when he had every reason to leave me dying on the road. Who tended my wounds and asked for nothing in return. Who has more honor in his smallest finger than this entire court combined? She let that sit for a moment, her gaze moving around the table, daring anyone to challenge her. He is here because I asked him to be, because I trust him. That should be sufficient. The lords and ladies exchanged glances, clearly unhappy, but unwilling to directly oppose their queen. The gray-haired lord tried one more time. We mean no disrespect to your judgment, Your Majesty, but these are dangerous times. The northern packs grow restless. Raiders test our borders. We need experienced counsel. Then test his counsel, Brissa said. Give him a problem. Let him show you what he can do. The room fell silent. Then a younger lord, one with calculating eyes and a cruel mouth, smiled. Very well. Master Stormrift, if you were in command of our forces, how would you defend against the northern packs currently gathering near the Blackwater Pass? Every eye turned to Korvek. He felt the weight of their skepticism, their eagerness for him to fail. Part of him wanted to do exactly that, to prove he did not belong here and escape back to his simple life. But then he looked at Brissa, saw the faith in her eyes, and something inside him hardened. He stepped forward to the central map. How many fighters do they have? Reports estimate 2,000, the young lord said smugly. We have 1,500 available to garrison the pass. Korvek studied the map, his mind working through possibilities with the same methodical focus he brought to every problem. The terrain here, he said, pointing to the narrow ravine just north of the pass. How defensible is it? Rocky. Difficult to traverse. Why? Because you are thinking of meeting them head-on at the pass, where their numbers give them advantage. He traced a different route. Instead, fall back. Let them think they have won. Draw them into the ravine. Post archers here and here. Block the rear with a small mobile force. They will be trapped in terrain that neutralizes their numbers and turns their strength against them. The room was silent. Then the gray-haired lord leaned forward, studying the map with new interest. That could work. It is unconventional, but the logic is sound. It is cowardly, the young lord spat. We do not run from fights. It is survival, Korvek said coldly, turning to face him. You fight to win, not to satisfy your pride. Dead men have plenty of honor and no future. Brissa's lips twitched, suppressing a smile. She turned to the council. His appointment stands. You will treat him with the respect his position deserves. Meeting adjourned. The lords and ladies filed out, some still muttering, others thoughtful. When the room finally emptied, Brissa sagged against the table with relief. That was terrifying, she admitted. Korvek moved to stand beside her. You enjoyed it. She laughed, surprised, perhaps a little. He studied the map, his mind still working through strategies and defenses. This is what you want from me? Military advice? That, she said, turning to face him, and someone to remind me that I am not alone in this. Someone who sees me, not just the crown. He reached out and tucked a strand of white hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly familiar despite their grand surroundings. I see you, he said softly. I have always seen you. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. Then that is enough. The rest we will figure out together. The weeks that followed were a strange new education. Korvek attended council meetings, initially as an observer, then gradually as an active participant. He learned the intricate dance of court politics, though he never fully embraced it. He preferred blunt honesty to pretty lies, and while it earned him enemies, it also earned him a grudging respect. The lords learned quickly that his lack of formal education did not mean lack of intelligence. He absorbed information with startling speed, connecting patterns they missed, seeing solutions from angles they had never considered. His strategies were unconventional, but effective, prioritizing practicality over tradition. And slowly, grudgingly, they began to listen. But it was outside the council chambers that Korvek truly found his purpose. He walked the city streets, talking with common soldiers, merchants, farmers who came to market. He learned their concerns, their needs, their complaints about policies made by people who had never gone hungry or cold. He brought these voices back to the council, insisting they be heard. You are making enemies, Brissa warned him one evening as they walked in the castle gardens, away from listening ears and watchful eyes. I do not care about being liked, he said simply. I care about being useful. She took his hand, threading her fingers through his in a gesture that had become natural between them. You are more than useful. You are necessary. He pulled her close, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. The moon was full, painting everything in silver light, and for a moment he was transported back to his small house, to simpler times when the world was just the two of them. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Bringing me here? She looked up at him, her silver eyes reflecting moonlight. Never. Do you? Sometimes, he admitted. Then I see you, and I remember why I stayed. She rose on her toes and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. They stood together in the garden, surrounded by the scent of night-blooming jasmine, and the distance between peasant and queen seemed to fade into nothing. But fate, as always, had other plans. The attack came without warning on a cold autumn morning. The northern packs, tired of waiting and emboldened by their numbers, launched a coordinated assault on 3 border towns simultaneously. Messengers arrived at the castle in a flurry of panic and blood, reporting fires, casualties, and enemy forces pushing deeper into the kingdom. The council convened in chaos. Lords shouted over each other, proposing and dismissing strategies with equal fervor. The gray-haired general wanted to split their forces to defend all 3 towns. The young, cruel-mouthed lord insisted on a full frontal assault. Others argued for fortifying the capital and abandoning the border settlements. Brisa sat at the head of the table, her face pale, listening to the cacophony with growing distress. Korvek watched her carefully, saw the moment fear began to creep into her eyes. She had faced countless decisions in her 4 years as queen, but never a military crisis of this scale. Never something where wrong choices could cost thousands of lives. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, uncertainty flickering across her face. The room fell silent, waiting. And for the first time since taking the throne, Alpha Queen Brisa Suncrest hesitated. Korvek did not think. He simply acted, driven by instinct and the bone-deep need to protect her from drowning in doubt. He stood, his massive frame drawing every eye in the room. "Your Majesty, may I speak?" Brisa looked at him, relief and gratitude flooding her features. "Please." He moved to the map, his mind already 3 steps ahead, seeing the pattern the scattered attacks revealed. "They want us to divide our forces. 3 targets means we split into thirds, and thirds are weak. They will pick us apart." "Then what do you propose?" the general demanded. "We cannot abandon those towns. We do not abandon them. We bait the trap." He pointed to the central of the 3 towns, a strategically important crossroads. "This is the real target. The other 2 attacks are diversions. They want us weak here, so they can take this and cut the kingdom in half." "How can you possibly know that?" the cruel-mouthed lord sneered. "Because it is what I would do," Korvek said flatly. He traced routes on the map with decisive motions. "We pull back from the outer 2 towns. Evacuate who we can, but do not fight there. Every available fighter goes here. We meet them at the crossroads with our full strength, not scattered thirds. We make our stand where it matters." "That is retreat," the lord spat. "Cowardice." Korvek turned on him, and something in his eyes made the lord take a step back. "That is survival. That is winning. You want glory? Go die in a meaningless battle at the border, but if you want to save this kingdom, you fight smart, not proud." The room erupted in argument, but Brisa stood, and the force of her presence demanded silence. "We follow Korvek's plan," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "Evacuate the outer towns. Concentrate our forces at the crossroads. General, you have 6 hours to mobilize." The general looked between the queen and Korvek, then nodded sharply. "It will be done." The council dispersed in a flurry of activity. Within the hour, runners were departing for the border, carrying orders and evacuation notices. Soldiers mobilized with impressive efficiency. The castle transformed into a war camp, every person moving with purpose. Korvek found himself in the center of it all, coordinating with generals, adjusting troop positions, ensuring supply lines remained intact. He worked through the night, fueled by determination and the knowledge that lives depended on getting this right. Near dawn, Brisa appeared beside him in the war room. He looked up from the maps to find her watching him with an expression he could not quite read. "Come with me," she said quietly. She led him to her private chambers, away from the chaos. The room was opulent by his standards, but intimate, filled with personal touches that made it feel like her. She closed the door and turned to face him. "The battle will be in 3 days," she said. "When our forces reach the crossroads?" "Yes. You should lead them." He stared at her. "I am not a general. I have never commanded troops in battle." You have commanded this entire operation, she countered. The generals listen to you now. The soldiers respect you. You see what they cannot. Brisa, he said, shaking his head. I am a farmer who thinks too much. I am not a warrior. She crossed to him, taking his face in her hands. You are the strongest man I have ever known, not because of your body, though she ran a hand over his broad chest, smiling slightly, but because of this. She placed her hand over his heart. You are brave enough to care, to fight for people you have never met. That makes you a warrior in ways these lords will never understand. He covered her hand with his own. What if I fail? What if my plan is wrong and people die because of it? Then we will grieve together, she said simply. But I trust you, Korvek. I trust you more than anyone else in this kingdom. Something fierce and protective surged through him. If I do this, I need you to promise me something. Anything. You stay here, safe in the capital, behind walls and guards. Her eyes flashed. I am the queen. My place is with my people. Your place, he said roughly, pulling her against him, is wherever you will survive. I cannot fight if I am terrified you will be hurt. Please, Brisa, let me do this knowing you are safe. She searched his face, then slowly nodded. But you come back to me. That is my condition. You come back. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, pouring 4 years of loneliness and 3 months of love into the embrace. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I promise, he said. While I breathe, nothing will happen to you. And that means I have to keep breathing. She smiled through tears. That is acceptable. They held each other as dawn broke over the castle, 2 people facing an uncertain future but facing it together. The journey to the crossroads took 2 days of hard riding. Korvek led the combined forces, 1,500 soldiers who watched him with wary respect. The generals rode beside him, offering tactical advice he absorbed and adapted. He felt the weight of their trust, their lives, pressing down on his shoulders. But he thought of Brisa, waiting in the capital, and the weight became bearable. They reached the crossroads at sunset of the 2nd day. The town had been evacuated, only soldiers remaining to fortify positions. Korvek walked the perimeter, studying the terrain with the same careful attention he gave his farmland. The crossroads sat in a shallow valley, hills rising on 3 sides. The northern approach, where the enemy would come, was the most exposed. Perfect. He positioned archers on the hillsides, concealed in the tree line. The main infantry force he divided into 3 groups, a strong center to draw the enemy in, and 2 flanks hidden just beyond the hills. It was the same principle as the ravine trap he had proposed months ago, but on a larger scale. We let them think they have us, he explained to the assembled commanders. They will see our center, think we are pinned in the valley, and push hard to break us. When they commit, the flanks close in from the hills. The archers rain down from above. We turn their momentum against them. And if they do not commit, the general asked, if they sense the trap, then we fight them straight. But they will not sense it. They have been winning. They are confident. Confidence makes you careless. The commanders dispersed to their positions. Night fell. Soldiers ate cold rations and checked weapons with nervous energy. Korvek walked among them, offering quiet words of encouragement, learning names, reminding them why they fought. Not for glory, not for honor, but for the people waiting at home who needed them to survive. He found himself thinking of his small house, his quiet life. Part of him longed for that simplicity. But a larger part knew he could never go back to being that man. He had changed. She had changed him. The attack came at dawn, as he had predicted. The northern packs poured into the valley like a dark tide, 2,000 strong, howling and fierce. They saw the center line and charged with savage joy, anticipating easy victory. Korvek stood in the center of his forces, tall and unmovable as a mountain. He waited. Let them come closer, closer. The soldiers around him tensed, ready to break, but he held them with sheer force of will. "Hold," he called out, his deep voice carrying over the din. "Hold." The enemy closed to 50 yards. 40, 30, "Now," he roared. Arrows blackened the sky. The flanks surged from the hills like waves. The enemy, suddenly surrounded and raked by arrows from above, faltered. Their advance stalled. Confusion spread through their ranks. Korvek drew the sword the queen had given him and raised it high. "Forward!" The center line surged. What had seemed like prey became predator in an instant. The valley turned into a killing ground, exactly as he had planned. The northern packs, caught in a trap they had not anticipated, broke. They scattered, running for the northern pass, and the kingdom forces pursued, driving them back across the border. By midday, it was over. The cost had been high. Soldiers lay wounded or dead across the valley. But the kingdom had held. The northern packs had been broken, their threat neutralized for years to come. And in the center of it all, covered in mud and blood but unharmed, stood Korvek Stormrift. The soldiers cheered. The generals clasped his shoulders with respect that was no longer grudging. He had proven himself not just as an advisor, but as a leader, a warrior, someone worthy of standing beside their queen. But all he could think about was getting back to her. The return to the capital took 3 days, slowed by wounded soldiers and the need to secure the border. When the city finally appeared on the horizon, Korvek felt something in his chest loosen. Home. It was strange to think of the capital that way, but that was what it had become. Not because of the castle or the luxury, but because she was there. He rode through the gates to find crowds lining the streets, cheering and throwing flowers. News of the victory had preceded them, but he barely noticed the celebration. His eyes searched for white hair and silver eyes. He found her at the castle gates, standing in front of the assembled court, wearing her crown in royal blue. But when their eyes met across the distance, all the formality fell away. She ran, straight through the watching crowd, with no care for dignity or protocol. She ran to him, and he dismounted in time to catch her as she threw herself into his arms. He lifted her off the ground, holding her tight, and felt her tears against his neck. "You came back," she sobbed. "You promised, and you came back." "Always," he said roughly. "Always." The crowd erupted in cheers. The soldiers joined in, banging swords against shields. And there, in front of the entire kingdom, the Alpha Queen kissed her peasant warrior with no shame or hesitation. When they finally broke apart, she took his hand and led him up the castle steps. The court bowed as they passed, respect and acceptance finally genuine. At the top of the steps, she turned to address the assembled masses. "This man saved our kingdom," she announced, her voice ringing clear and strong. "He is Korvek Stormrift, and from this day forward, he stands beside me not as advisor or general, but as my chosen consort." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The court looked shocked, but no one dared protest. The soldiers, however, roared their approval. Brissa turned to Korvek, her eyes shining. "I know we have not spoken of this. I know it is sudden, but I am done waiting. I am done pretending. If you will have me, if you will share this crown and this burden, then I offer you everything I am, queen and woman, ruler and partner, yours if you want me." Korvek looked at this extraordinary woman who had stumbled into his life and changed everything. He thought about the man he had been, bitter, alone, convinced he would die as he had lived, in solitude. He thought about the man he had become, still rough around the edges, still more comfortable in fields than ballrooms, but no longer alone, no longer afraid. He knelt before her, there on the castle steps, in front of the kingdom, took her hand and pressed it to his lips. "I was nothing," he said, his voice low but carrying. "A farmer, a survivor. You saw something in me I did not see in myself. You gave me purpose. You gave me hope. You gave me love." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I would be honored to stand beside you, to protect you, to love you for whatever days I have left. I am yours, Brissa, in this life and whatever comes after." She pulled him to his feet, no longer bothering to hide her tears. "Then let us build something together. A kingdom where strength is not measured by birth, but by character. Where a peasant can become a king, and a queen can find love twice in one lifetime." She kissed him again, and the kingdom celebrated around them, the beginning of something new. The coronation took place a month later, a ceremony that blended tradition with innovation in ways that made the old guard uncomfortable and the common people rejoice. Korvek stood before the assembled lords and ladies, merchants and farmers, soldiers and scholars. Brissa placed a crown on his head, simple and strong, matching his personality. But it was what happened after that people would remember. King Korvek Stormrift knelt before his queen in front of everyone and spoke words he had written himself. "I swear to you," he said, his voice steady and sure. "While I breathe, nothing will harm you. I swear to this kingdom that I will serve not with birthright, but with my blood, my mind, and my heart. I swear to see the people not as subjects, but as the foundation of all we build. And I swear to remember always that I come from the same earth they do. I have not forgotten. I will never forget." The hall erupted in cheers that shook the rafters. That night, alone in their chambers, Brissa removed both their crowns and set them aside. She turned to Korvek with a soft smile. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "Your farm, your quiet life." He pulled her close, running his fingers through her white hair. "Sometimes. Then I look at you and realize I have traded one kind of home for another. As long as you are with me, I am exactly where I belong." She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "We make quite a pair. A queen who wanted to escape and a peasant who never wanted to be found. And yet here we are," he murmured into her hair. "Found. Together." They stood in the firelight. Two souls who had saved each other in ways that had nothing to do with falling from horses or strategic brilliance. They had saved each other from loneliness, from the belief that they had to face the world alone. The years that followed were not easy. There were challenges, conflicts, moments when the weight of the crown threatened to crush them both, but they faced it together, king and queen, peasant and ruler, two people who understood that real strength came not from titles, but from choosing, every single day, to keep showing up for each other. The kingdom prospered under their joint rule. Korvek's practical reforms lifted farmers and merchants out of poverty. Brissa's diplomatic skill kept the peace with neighboring realms. Together, they built schools, hospitals, infrastructure that connected the kingdom like never before. But more than that, they built a partnership that became legendary. Songs were written about the queen who fell and the peasant who caught her. Stories were told to children about true love that transcended class and expectation. And through it all, the two people at the center of the legend simply lived their lives, grateful for every morning they woke beside each other. The first winter they ruled together brought challenges neither had anticipated. A plague swept through the lower districts of the capital, and while the council suggested quarantining the affected areas and letting the sickness run its course, Korvek would hear none of it. He walked the infected streets himself, organizing medical care, food distribution, and shelter for those displaced. The court was horrified. A king did not risk himself for commoners. But Brissa understood. She joined him in the streets, crown abandoned, her white hair covered with a simple shawl. Together they moved through the suffering, bringing not just supplies, but hope. The plague would not take these people while their king and queen stood beside them. When it was finally over, when the last patient had either recovered or been buried with honor, the people's love for their unusual rulers had transformed into something unbreakable. They had proven that crowns meant nothing if those who wore them forgot their humanity. In the council chamber, the gray-haired general approached Korvek privately one evening. "I was wrong about you," he admitted, his weathered face sincere. "I thought you were a farmer playing at being a king. But you are the first true king I have served in 40 years, one who rules with his heart as much as his mind." Korvek clasped the old man's shoulder. "I am still a farmer, but I learned long ago that tending crops and tending people require the same things: attention, care, the willingness to get your hands dirty." The general smiled. "Then perhaps we need more farmers on thrones." But it was in the quiet moments that Korvek and Brissa truly thrived. Morning walks in the garden before the court woke, late nights in the library, planning reforms while sharing wine and gentle touches, stolen afternoons when they would slip away to the royal stables, saddling horses themselves, and riding out into the countryside like the common people they had once been. On one such afternoon, they found themselves at the spot where he had found her, the bend in the road where everything had changed. They dismounted and stood in silence, remembering. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had ridden a different road that night?" Brissa asked, her hand finding his. "Every day," he admitted, "and every day I am grateful you chose this one." She turned to face him, the afternoon sun turning her white hair to gold. "Do you know what I was thinking that night, when I left the castle alone? Tell me." "I was thinking I could not do it anymore. 4 years of ruling alone, of making impossible decisions, of being strong when I felt weak. I was so tired, Korvek. So tired of being what everyone needed me to be. And now?" She smiled, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "Now I have you to share the burden, to remind me that I am human first and queen second, to love me when I am weak and celebrate me when I am strong. You saved me that night, but not the way you think. You saved me from drowning in loneliness." He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "You saved me too. I was already dead, just too stubborn to lie down. You gave me a reason to live again." They stood together on that lonely road, two people who had found each other in the darkness and built something beautiful in the light. The seasons turned. Spring brought diplomatic visits from neighboring kingdoms, and Brissa's grace and intelligence secured alliances that had eluded previous monarchs. Summer brought harvest festivals, where Korvek insisted on participating in the commoners' competitions, winning respect by refusing to let his title exclude him from working alongside his people. Autumn brought trade negotiations that filled the treasury without oppressing the merchants. Winter brought the anniversary of their first year ruling together. On that anniversary, Brissa surprised him with a gift. She led him to a part of the castle he had never explored, down corridors she had ordered sealed during renovations. When she finally stopped before a heavy oak door, she handed him a key. "Open it," she said, her eyes dancing with suppressed excitement. He unlocked the door and pushed it open, then stopped in wonder. It was his house, or rather, an exact replica built inside the castle itself. The same rough wooden walls, the same simple hearth, the same modest furniture. Even the smell was right: wood smoke, and earth and simplicity. "I had it built in secret," Brissa explained, watching his face. "For the days when the crown becomes too heavy, when we need to remember who we were before all of this. Our sanctuary." Korvek turned to her, this remarkable woman who understood him so completely. Words failed him, so he simply lifted her into his arms and carried her across the threshold, just as he had that first night when she was hurt and unconscious, and he had no idea his life was about to change forever. They made love by the firelight in that recreated house, slow and tender and full of the kind of intimacy that only comes from truly knowing another person. Afterward, they lay tangled together on the simple bed, her white hair spilling across his chest, his arms wrapped protectively around her. "I love you," he said into the silence. "I do not say it enough, but I love you with everything I am." She tilted her head to look at him, her silver eyes soft. "I know. You show me every day in 1,000 small ways, but it is still good to hear." "I was afraid," he admitted, "when you first brought me to the castle. Afraid I would fail you, that I would not be enough. And now? Now I am still afraid. But I am not alone in my fear. We carry it together." She kissed his scarred knuckles, each one a testament to years of hard labor. "That is what love is," she murmured. "Not the absence of fear, but the courage to face it together." They slept that night in their secret sanctuary, dreaming of simpler times while building a complex future. The years continued their steady march. Challenges came and went. Border skirmishes were resolved through Korvek's strategic brilliance and Bryce's diplomatic skill. Economic crises were averted through reforms that balanced the needs of all classes. Natural disasters were met with swift, organized responses that saved countless lives. But it was the small rebellions that defined their reign. When the council insisted on maintaining laws that favored nobility over commoners, Korvek and Brissa rewrote them. When tradition demanded they live separate lives with separate chambers, they refused, sharing their space and their lives without apology. When the court objected to a peasant-born king participating in manual labor during harvest season, he did it anyway, and the people loved him for it. They were not perfect rulers. They made mistakes. They argued sometimes, fierce debates that cleared the air and left them stronger. But they never stopped listening to each other, never stopped respecting the perspectives they each brought to the throne. On their 10th anniversary as rulers, the kingdom threw a celebration that lasted 3 days. But on the actual day of their coronation anniversary, Korvek and Brissa slipped away from the festivities. They rode out to his original house, the small wooden structure that still stood on his land, maintained by a local family in exchange for farming the surrounding fields. They sat on the doorstep as the sun set, watching the sky turn gold and crimson and violet. Neither spoke for a long time, content simply to be together in the place where their love had begun. "Do you have any regrets?" Brissa finally asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "Only one," he said. She looked up, surprised and a little concerned. "That I did not tell you I loved you sooner. That first night by the fire, when I watched you sleep and knew my life would never be the same, I should have told you then." She smiled, sad and sweet. "I was not ready to hear it then. Neither of us were. We needed time to become the people who could love this way." He kissed the top of her head. "You are wise, my queen, and you are strong, my king." They sat together as darkness fell. Two souls who had found each other against impossible odds and built a love that would outlast kingdoms. In the distance, they could hear the festival continuing, celebrations of their reign and their union. But here, in the quiet, they celebrated something more personal. The choice they made every day to choose each other, to honor each other, to love each other with the same fierce devotion they brought to ruling their kingdom. The moon rose, full and bright, the same moon that had witnessed a woman falling from a horse and a man choosing compassion over indifference. And in its silver light, a king and queen who had been a peasant and a lost woman recommitted themselves to each other without words, without ceremony, but with the bone-deep certainty that this love was the foundation upon which everything else was built. Years later, when both their heads had gone gray and laugh lines creased their faces, when new challenges had been met and overcome and their legend had grown beyond their control, Korvek and Brissa would still slip away to this place. They would sit on that same doorstep and remember. Remember the night the moon was full and a woman fell from a horse. Remember the peasant who saved a queen without knowing what he held in his arms. Remember 3 weeks of stolen happiness in a house that smelled of wood smoke and hope. Remember the moment he realized she was a queen and felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Remember the moment she asked him to come to the capital and he chose courage over safety. Remember the battles fought and won, the reforms implemented, the lives changed. But mostly they remembered this, the simple gift of each other, the miracle of finding someone who saw you completely and loved you anyway, the grace of building something together that was stronger than anything either could have built alone. And they would smile, these two people who had found each other in the darkness and chosen, against all odds and logic, to hold on. Because some loves are written in the stars, grand and sweeping and destined from birth, and some are written in the earth, born from simple kindness and quiet strength, from choosing to help a stranger on a lonely road. And those, sometimes, are the loves that transform not just hearts, but kingdoms. Those are the loves that last forever. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.